Hi,
Morning. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
The meet you or whatever they say.
Yes, I know this whole Zoom thing is so weird. I'm getting used to it though.
Where do you live?
Well, normally I live in New York City, but I've always, or for a long time, have had a country house in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
And that's where I am now. I've become a refugee to the pandemic
Sure.
or pandemic refugee.
Yep.
Um,
I went on my first road trip ever with my then girlfriend, I guess, who became my wife. I took her to a New York Giant game in the middle of December. Oh, no, we went away for the weekend in Bucks County. It's the only time I've ever been to
uh,
Bucks County. Stayed
where'd you go? Where in Bucks County? New Hope, or do you even remember?
some other names. Give me some other.
All right. So the New Hope is the main town that's like
Well, there are like a lot of Airbnbs, and it's a cute little town.
it's a cute little town. It's very artsy. The gays have long been
I didn't see any days when I was there,
in
but it was
New Hope.
maybe something you.
There's so the town that I'm in is called Upper Black Eddy, which is in Upper Bucks County,
Mhm.
and there's there's a cute little town called Lumberville and
I think, you know,
Carversville.
bottom line is we went a great weekend, and then on the way back, I routed to go through Giant Stadium to go to a Giants Eagles game in the middle of December, and it was freaking freezing. And
Yeah.
even me, we only played 3 quarters, but she was a gamer enough to last that long, and that was my only trip to Bucks County actually ever. Chris, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good panel yesterday.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, how did the panel go? Thank you guys so much for doing that. I'm so sorry I couldn't do it.
Special
Was
time.
it good?
Get special time with you tonight. Yeah, it was really good. It was, I got my guy Andy on from Head Count, and he was really good. And Chris was good talking about the movie, and Barry Cole I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
Talking about you must know Barry as a New Yorker, right, Chris?
Yes, a former New Yorker, but yes, I ran across him before.
Yeah.
I'm up in Seattle now.
Oh, really? What are you doing up there?
Moved here about 4 years ago. My parents live here, and they were getting a little too old to travel and looking for kind of a place to raise the kids, and this seemed like the right fit.
Mm-hmm. My daughter just moved to Hood River, Oregon.
Okay.
A couple weeks ago, so we're going to go up there and visit Thanksgiving, I think. But that's a major escape from New York. She only went Bucks County a couple hours away.
Yeah, I can still go back and forth. Although it was a big thing for me this past weekend. I actually packed up my stuff out of my New York City apartment and rented it out for a
Wow, that's big.
major. I've lived in New York for 28 years.
Where in the city were you?
East Village.
The whole time?
Well, no. So I lived for a minute on the very, very upper west side. It's almost like it was on the border between Harlem and the Upper West Side where I was.
I moved around so much when I was there.
In the early 90s, it was, I would have called it the ghetto, know? And then I was in Williamsburg when that was the ghetto. Right. There was nothing in Williamsburg when I lived there. There wasn't even a 24-hour ATM. So I would have to make sure that I had cash before I left Manhattan, because this was before we could Apple Pay or any of those things, So
I grew up in New York, and I tell people Brooklyn, when I grew up in Staten Island, Brooklyn was a place that you just drove through to get to Manhattan. All along the water, you never actually went into it.
Well, I remember when people first started moving to Brooklyn, because they would be like, oh, we're getting to that stage in our lives when we have kids. And they would buy a brownstone because, families could afford to buy a brownstone back then. And because it was cheaper than a Manhattan apartment. And I would be like, all right, well, so it was nice to know you. I'll never see you again
It's
because
like
you're
you're going to
moving
another
Brooklyn.
No, I moved to Park Slope in 1990, I guess.
Yeah.
Because it was so much cheaper.
Yeah. Well, that's why I lived in Williamsburg, because I was poor.
I moved to California in September 90, never went back.
Yeah.
Once I got here, I was like, wait, I can make the same living and live by the beach? I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Mary, what's your Grammy hardware for in the background? What is that for?
That's old hardware, but I did a documentary about Sam Cooke about 20 years ago now.
Mhm.
And it's called Sam Cooke Legends. And it's really hard to find because I think we only cleared the music for about 10 years.
Why the favorite word is perpetuity, man. You got to have it.
Back then, it wasn't like a thing, you couldn't even get perpetuity, I don't think, So yeah, you can find it in pieces, maybe on YouTube or,
You did some good work. I mean, some of the VH1 stuff you did is really fantastic stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.
music.
That was I would call it like grad school for.
Yeah. So probably know Rick Krim, right?
Yeah, totally.
Probably know maybe even oh God, what was my boy's name from Buffalo that ran it for a long time? Little dude.
David.
Little dude.
Michael.
No.
Michael, not Michael. What was his name?
God, I'm getting old.
Okay, it's not a Michael. I know the time is not kind to the mind or the face.
Sal was at VH1, right?
Sal Locurdo.
Sal Locurdo was there.
Yes.
Rick Krim. Who else?
Rick Krim. David Weir. Did you know David Weir?
No.
There's one of the old timers that's still there. That's like a big cheese. Somehow has managed to survive all the bloodbaths of layoffs. What's his name? That's still there. Bruce.
Yeah, he got big. He went there and got back big again.
Yeah. He's like the, I don't know, EVP or something like that.
I didn't know, but yeah, behind the music, I mean, that was a legendary thing. It really did. It was great what you guys did.
Yeah, I started off with when Bill Flanagan, who was the writer on Jimmy Carter Rock and Roll President, he was the EP for the Legends series.
Right.
And I did a bunch of those. And the Sam Cooke documentary actually was, it was done as a co-pro with VH1. We did two versions. We were making two versions at the same time. One for VH1 that was broadcast, and then we did a feature length that ABCO put out, and as a DVD back then. That's what they did.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, ABCO just produced a movie with my guy Keith Calder. I used to work at Jive Records. Clive Calder ran Jive Records. His son become a film producer. He did this movie Blind Spotting I did with them a couple years ago, which was on Obama's top 10 list. If you haven't seen it, it's a kind of a must see.
I'll check it out.
Called Blind Spotting. So Lionsgate is now spinning it into a TV show. So we're starting that now.
Cool.
But anyway, so Keith Calder, they just produced this movie about Muhammad Ali with ABCO, all about Sam Cooke and Muhammad.
That moment is amazing. That was that we literally opened the film with that right. Footage of Muhammad Ali bringing Sam Cooke into the ring.
Right. I think it opened at Toronto, but obviously everything's so different now with a film festival.
Yeah.
Anyway, this film festival is something that I've wanted to do for years. And we've been talking about it with Mondo for like 3 years. It was like, well, theaters are so expensive. We can't do it. We don't have enough money. And I was like, just put up a couple films. I'll bring in my film. And then we'll bring Ed Gerard's film, Mr. Soul, is fantastic, by the way. If you haven't seen that film, I'd love you to watch that film. And my film turned out really well. The first film I've directed called Long Live Rock. Celebrate.
Oh, how cool. I want to see.
And what happened was we were on this conference call about putting this political panel together. And I forget who brought up your movie. And I was like, wow. And then I looked at the trailer. I was like, I want to see that movie. And then Ed's like, I know Chris Robertson. I was like, all right, get him on the phone and let's see if we can do Q&A. But the problem is, it's too much going on, not enough promotion, not enough marketing. So
it's hard, man. It's a terrible time right now for everything. Like I won't even look. I'm appreciative that you guys are paying attention to our movie and plugging it. And
what I'll do is, because you guys played ball with me, I'll help promote and market the movie because I just love the movie and I grew up as a teenager not knowing about any of that stuff, and so that's what makes documentaries beautiful. I
appreciate that.
Things like I had no idea growing up in New York and as a teenager what Carter did and how he put it together and how he used these bands and helped him and they just vibed him because he was such a natural guy, like Obama or Clinton in his own way. So again, the point is like this movie should be up for a Grammy next year. You should, I don't know if you put in for it this year or next.
Wait, no, because it didn't meet the deadline. So that they changed it's September 1. We came out on the 9th.
I'm actually on that committee that nominates films.
Amazing.
Committee. Next year, we'll make sure we'll stay in touch and we'll make sure that you should do a thing with Scott at the Grammy Museum.
Yeah.
I've screened a couple movies there that I've directed and produced, and they do Q&As, and now they're obviously all virtual, but you should
love to do that. Absolutely. Yes.
So yeah, I think that and then we'll put it up on our site, on the Guild site, and we want to do more of these screenings and just kind of get the word out for these films because
cool.
Kind of like marketing a record, it's hand-to-hand combat, and you just find people and pin them down and get them to watch.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's worse, like a destination screening, like you have to show up at this time, or say, hey, you have any time in the next 3 days, and people are like, oh great, I'll do it.
But then they forget. That's the thing that I've noticed is everyone is telling me like, oh, I can't wait to watch it, or I'm going to watch it tonight or this weekend or whatever. And then it just doesn't happen.
How long have you been on the promotional? We might as well just start kicking it off. We'll just start kicking it off because it's after 6:30. So I'll do an intro and then we'll just go right into it.
Okay.
Who's on? Is Sammy, you on from the Guild?
This is Stephanie.
Hey, Steph, how are you, sweetie?
Doing well. How are you?
Robertson.
Hello.
Hello.
So anyway, so we're recording, I guess, right? So I just kick right into it.
Go for it.
Put it up on our site afterwards and post promote, so to speak. Hi, I'm Jonathan McHugh, and we are here at the first annual Guild of Music Supervisors Mondo Film Festival. We're screening some amazing docs for the last couple of days. We screened Mr. Soul, we screened my film Long Live Rock, and now we're screening Mary Wharton's film Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President, that Chris Robertson, one of our Guild members, is the supervisor for. So we're going to kick it off with Mary Wharton and talking to her. Mary, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you guys out there?
Where are you tonight?
I'm in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Awesome. And Chris Robertson,
Wayne State.
Right. You better make sure that voter turnout is solid from Democratic caucuses.
I will be there at 7 a.m. on voting day, in-person voting.
That stuff is worrying me, man. It's very worrisome out there in the world. The world is nervous. Change must happen, as they say. Chris Robertson, where are you today?
I'm up in Washington State near Seattle. We're a very, very blue state, so no worries up here.
Anyway, Mary, congratulations. Your film is fantastic. I loved it.
Thank you.
Everyone who's seen it on our committee loved it. And I guess we'll just kick right into it. So first of all, how did you get into telling this story? How did it happen?
Well, I have to give props to my producer, Chris Farrell, who he came across this story sort of randomly, he was working on another project that was related to the Allman Brothers, and he met with some folks down in Atlanta, and potential. He was looking for financiers he wanted to get involved in a music documentary, and he and I had been separately talking about doing something together. We'd been friends for 20 years or more and just wanted to do something together. We were kicking around ideas, and he called me and he was like, I think I got something that you're going to be interested in. And he wouldn't even tell me about it on the phone because he was like, I don't know, I'm in Atlanta, people might be listening. He felt like he was like sitting on this secret, and it kind of was.
He had the gold mine in his pocket.
Yeah, and it kind of was a secret. But the interesting thing was, it was like, I always talk about it as this secret that was hiding in plain sight. As soon as I started digging into it and looking for it, it was there. It's just something that I never knew. And I was shocked when he did finally, he wouldn't even tell me about it on a cell phone. He wanted to like wait until we were in person together in New York City. I had to set up a lunch and be like, I remember talking to my husband and just being like, Chris has this idea and he won't even tell me about it. It's like top secret. It must be really big. It must be really good, And I was dying of curiosity, and I was like, wow, this is interesting because it's a different kind of music documentary. It's like the idea of making a music documentary about a politician was so intriguing to me because it was this cool opportunity to kind of co-opt and the form of a music documentary, but like subversively talk about other things, like using this format in a different way was so exciting to me. So I was like, immediately, let's do it.
So what's interesting, when you look up his credits, he has no film credits. So what was his skill set to be able to mount this film after never producing a movie?
Well, yeah, I mean, first time producer, I think he really knocked it out of the park. But he, what he brought to it was passion, quite honestly. He was passionate about the project. He wanted to do something. He had spent his career working in business and finance, and he wanted to do something that fed his soul a little bit, I think. And he hit on this thing, and he was so dedicated to it. And quite honestly, without his passion, this thing never would have happened, because people said to him, you'll never raise money for this film with Mary as a director because she's not famous enough. She's not a household name. Exactly.
Even though she got a Grammy over her shoulder.
I got a Grammy on my shelf. That and a Subway token, and I could get home at night, although we don't use tokens anymore. But, it was really a thing where he had to stick by his gut. He had to go with his gut because that's all he had. And he had people that were way more experienced than him, telling him, giving him advice. And he certainly was one to follow good advice when he got it. But at the same time, I think that documentary filmmaking is it has to be a little bit of a labor of love because, the number of people that actually get rich making documentaries is probably like
I think it's Alex Gibney. I think that's
maybe Michael Moore. It's
one hand's worth of people.
Martin Scorsese doesn't make his living by making music documentaries. He does great music documentaries, but like they're fun for him, So it's a passion, and Chris had the passion, he had the fire in his belly, and he was committed to it, and he really believed in the subject matter as being something that was important. You know, he was inspired by the results of the 2016 election to do something that, you know, mattered in the world, to like put forth a positive message. And that was one of the things that we really you know, made sure with this film. I mean, I think with my work always has a lot of heart, and I'm certainly one to wear my heart on my sleeve, and you'll see that in the film. But Jimmy Carter also wears his heart on his sleeve, and he has a big open heart, and I think that that's what is sort of the power of music, is that it does open your heart. It does allow you to connect with people who are very different from you. You know, we all listen to the same songs, we all can dance to the same rhythms, and music reminds us that we're a lot more alike than we are different. And that was something that was important to both of us.
So last question on the germination, and we'll move into music. So did he help start funding and raising money to start shooting, or to build sizzle reel? Because that's what I've been doing on my films. And
yeah. I mean, he actually, you know, I don't know if he'll get mad at me for saying this, because, you know, it's sort of the first rule is never put your own money into a documentary. But he actually put in the seed money to start shooting, because we had an opportunity with President Carter, and he funded the first shoots.
If you get that opportunity and you want to be a filmmaker, you can't wait to go find money. You just got to go, because that's like, you know, getting a Bob Dylan interview and getting a Jimmy Carter interview. These things don't happen every day. People do not get these opportunities. So that was my question. And then obviously moving into the Dylan interview, set that scenario up for me. Actually, let me get a better question. Let me lead in on that. So Chris, right, you had a lot of songs to clear, and not like tiny little songs, big songs. So my first question on the music side is for Mary. So Jimmy Carter walks in, for those who haven't seen the film, Jimmy Carter walks in, puts on a record to open the scene, and it's one of the most famous songs of all time. So Mary, set that story up for us, and also moving into Chris, because my thought was, wait, if he didn't know what he was putting on, that means you don't know what you're necessarily clearing.
Right.
It can be a disaster if you don't get the song cleared. So about that.
Well, I had tried to sort of cover myself I brought a bunch of records that I knew that he would like. And I figured, we'll shoot it a couple times. We'll give ourselves some cover, you know, like if we don't get, of course we knew we wanted to start with the Dylan song, but, you know, just in case, it'd be good to have a backup. Well, President Carter wasn't so keen to do, it's a funny thing directing a president, you know?
What to do.
And he wasn't interested in doing a second take. So that's all we had. This was my big idea for the grand opening of the movie. And so I basically called Chris Robertson and was like, yeah, I got a job for you.
Okay, so let's stop on that 1 second. So how do you two know each other, and how did Chris end up being on the project?
Well, Chris and I have known each other for a long time. We've kind of worked together a little peripherally over the years, and he's helped us out on some things, you know, by us, I mean, just me on various projects, but we haven't really done a film together before. But I always loved his energy and his vibe, and we talked to a couple different, you know, bigger, you know, big time music supervisors that we were like, you know, let's get quotes and let's talk to people. And I didn't like what any of them were telling me, and and Chris was telling me, you know, he had done some documentaries, and that, you know, I knew that he could do what we needed to do, and he had the right energy and the right appreciation for what we were trying to do. And yeah, so I was like, let's do this. And he did a fantastic, amazing job. I mean,
so Chris, what was your approach to clearing the music? And especially, one thing that I've done well with is what I call the Bob Dylan MFN, because for some reason they got a guy there, Jeff Rosen, that's worked with Bob forever, really gets the game of what we do, plays ball, will work with you on a reasonable rate. And so then once you get a Bob Dylan song and then you go to these other publishers and labels and they're like, oh no, I can't give my artist up for that. I'm sorry. And then I go, wait, are you bigger than Bob Dylan? Because Bob Dylan's in. So I call that the Bob Dylan MFN. So I wanted to see if you happen to play that game at all.
Yeah, I have. In this case, I would say it was Dylan and Paul Simon. I think when we had those two, it was sort of that double firepower. And that always helps. And having when that first major publisher comes in who has 3 or 4 songs, and being able to tell people, Universal's doing this or Warner Chappell's doing, that always helps. Yeah, so everybody feels like the
wave starts to roll.
The wave starts to roll. People, people understand what it is. People want to be in it. They understand, there's like 40 songs in this film. So, it's a documentary and they understand budgets. So I would say, most everybody played along pretty well. Some clearances take a while, when you got an artist like U2, even though Mary was able to get the interview with Bono, you got to go through all the machinery to get that approval, which is not always so easy, but pretty much everything came through. And yeah, we were really happy with it. Mary, I was racking my brain, like, when did we make? I know it was back in the VH1 days, but it's been forever.
Yes, it's been forever. And there was one project that you helped me out with that never even happened, which was that Live and Outside project that I was trying to raise money for a documentary that never happened. And Chris was really helpful in terms of just advising and sometimes when you're just like out there, look, the thing about making documentaries is you spend way more time doing the work of getting the money for a film than you ever spend actually making the film. And you have to do that for films that never even happen. So, this is why the economics of it don't work out.
And as we talked about, the marketing aspect of it is even more brutal than raising the money and shooting and editing and clearing all the music and special effects or getting all the rights that you need for the archival. It's a painful process. So people don't realize what it is, but when you make a great one, they love it and they talk about it. And you guys you did a really nice job on making this movie.
Thank you.
So Chris, how did you guys decide, obviously the Dylan, Paul Simon, you get a couple big ones like that had a relationship with Jimmy. It all kind of falls into place. Allman Brothers. Were there other outliers that ended up making it in or didn't make it in, and that, things that were problematic for you clearing?
I don't recall any song that we really wanted or had to have that we had to lose. I mean, I mentioned before that we had an Eagles song in there, which I told Mary from the very beginning is, that's going to be a tough one, especially since he was working for the opposition. the Eagles were sort of in what was it, Jerry Brown's camp, right, during the campaign. So, they wanted to see the clip. I remember we went through a whole process with them, and in the end, they, respectfully declined.
Shall we say, right? Playing ball.
But we had to, I think we lost a few songs that were pretty great that didn't, we had an Elvis in there and a couple other things that we
did try to clear a Chuck Berry song because there was some cool footage of Chuck Berry performing on the White House lawn. And I thought it was really funny that in this footage, it was sort of like, there was all this sort of backstory that was kind of interesting to me that didn't really translate into the film, which is why the scene got cut. But like Chuck Berry was actually being indicted for tax fraud, and he had to turn himself in. Like, he was in Washington, D.C. to play at the White House for this concert on the lawn, and Jimmy Carter's there, and he's loving it, and he makes this speech about how he can't even. Chuck Berry makes a speech about how he can't even believe that he's performing for the president, and then literally the next day he had to go turn himself in to the authorities on charges of tax fraud.
You know the story about Chuck, right? Chuck would show up at a gig with 2 guitar cases, one of them empty.
He wanted his cash. Well,
cash only.
Yeah.
Don't give me a check. I don't want to know about it. Just put the cash in the guitar case and I'm gone.
But that's the music business. I mean, that was the funny thing that even like the Carter staff would tell us when they were doing these fundraising concerts. They would have to go. One of the, campaign people, there was a guy, Tom Beard, who's in the film, who told this amazing story that didn't make the cut just because we couldn't find any footage to support it. But they did a concert in like New Haven, Connecticut, and it was at some college, and it was Toots and the Maytals doing a campaign fundraiser for President Carter. And Tom Beard talked about showing up, and they had a huge crowd, and they raised like $10,000, and he had to find like sacks that were big enough to carry away all the cash. And they would be like counting out the cash. And, they had to, because of campaign finance laws, they had to account for all this money, and they needed all these little slips from each ticket buyer that had their name and address on it so that they could turn those in and get matching funds from the government.
Right. That was I learned about matching funds in the movie.
It was crazy.
About matching funds. I didn't know about Jerry Brown. I didn't remember about Jerry Brown.
I didn't know about Jerry Brown either, which is a great story. But there were so many funny stories about like stuff like that like even Tom Beard had saved one of the ticket stubs, because I honestly didn't believe in that this had ever happened. Like, can you imagine Toots and the Maytals are like, he was like, God rest his soul. He just died recently as from COVID. In fact, Toots was a victim of COVID, and he, is the father of reggae. He was the first person to ever use the word reggae in a song. Like, can you imagine the pot smoking that was going on at that concert? Speaking
of pot smoking, the story of Willie talking about smoking weed, or Jimmy talking about Willie smoking weed at the White House, is also bananas. That's a fantastic one.
Amazing story. It just sort of speaks to how times have changed in that, now pot is basically legal in many, it is legal in many states, and it's sort of been decriminalized. And, obviously we have a long way to go in terms of like, there's a lot of disproportionately, African-American people who have been given jail sentences for marijuana. And, I think that there's no need to make light of that for sure, but we have come a long way, and marijuana is really seen no differently than alcohol now. But in the 70s, it was a different story, and I know this like firsthand. I can say
I was arrested for smoking marijuana. So
my father served jail time for marijuana possession.
You beat me to the punch. My next segue is explain the concept of hiring the sauce boss for your film.
Well, this is a great story because we had originally thought that we should get a very famous person to do the score. And we knew that we were going to have an amazing soundtrack from, all these great, recognizable pop songs, but we thought we would get a famous person to do the score. And we had someone who wanted to do it. And I'm not going to say the person's name, but she was a big artist who I am a huge fan of, and I would have been a lifelong dream to work with her in this way. and she had agreed to do it for, relatively very, very low fee because we were low documentary budget, but she was going on this major tour and she didn't really have time to do it. And in the schedule that the framework of our schedule didn't work for her. So I had to say, thank you so much for your, interest but and it was really, really hard because it seemed like she really wanted to do it. And I didn't know what we were going to do. And Chris Farrell, the producer, has this friend, his name's Bradley Cole Smith, and he's an Atlanta singer-songwriter. He's played with some big artists. And he was like, well, Bradley could give us some tracks. And that kind of gave me a little bit, like I was nervous to put my dad out there as like, well, my dad's really good.
A little bit, because I looked up your dad, right? When I
Yeah.
saw Boss and I saw the last name and I was like, okay, brother. And then I see the Sauce Boss and I'm like, oh my God, I want to know about this guy. So can you tell us a little bit
Tell us
more
about the Sauce Boss.
how the Sauce Boss thing started? Because it's kind of interesting.
It's a great story. My dad is a really an incredible guitar player, and I'm biased obviously, but he's an incredible singer songwriter. He's a blues man. He's a classic, sort of entertainer.
Where did you grow up?
He's in Florida. We Whartons go back many generations in Florida, and he's been playing the blues and playing rock and roll and the blues his whole life. He's never really had a real job. And
he's been able to living at it the whole time?
Yeah. Oh yeah. His whole life. Like, I think before my sister and I were born, he had a job at the phone company for a minute. But that didn't last long. But clearly my mother supported the family for a long time, but then my dad, put together some kind of a music career, and he's done really well. And he's really big in France, and he's an incredibly talented player because he's so true to the music. That's all he's ever done. And that's, when you spend 70 years playing the guitar, you're going to get good at it.
Vintage steel guitar. Right?
Yeah, he has a national,
guitars that are just beautiful and sound beautiful.
Yeah, and actually someone gave him that guitar. He's the kind of guitar player that people literally just give him expensive guitars because they say, oh, you'll play this better than I ever will. He's had like 3 or 4 guitars just given to. He has a Les Paul Gold Top, like from the like very rare guitar that someone just gave him because.
And has he ever done score for movies before?
No, he has not. And so that was also part of my trepidation of bringing him into the project. Was I just, I knew that he had tracks that we could use, and I asked him to send me some tracks. Like, I was like, whatever you have that doesn't have vocals on it, if you can, get, mixes where you strip away the vocals on your existing tracks, just give us that. We'll start with that. And then when this whole thing didn't work out with this other composer, I had a scene and I was like, I'm going to send you a scene and you can write a score, piece of music for this score. And I told him kind of what I was looking for, and he just fully nailed it. Like, I gave him, so there were 2 different scenes that were the first 2 that I asked him to do original score for. And for one of them, I gave him the reference of, I want this to have a little bit of the vibe of like Joan Baez, Diamonds and Rust. And he nailed it. And then I was like, all right, there's this other scene. It's about the Iran hostages. Like, I need a little bit of a Link Ray, like a bow, bow kind of vibe. Right. Nailed it. Like, so that's like the range that I gave him to do. And it was, he just nailed it every time. And then he he ended up giving us about 17 tracks in all. Some were existing, some he re-recorded melodies that he had done before, and we brought him into the studio in New York, and he just did some score. Like I showed him some scenes, and he was like, "Oh, what do you think about this?" And he just brought his guitar and just played a bunch of stuff, and that was one of the funnest days of really of my whole career. Was like,
well, it brings it full circle, right? You have this
yeah,
musician who's kind of out there, and then all of a sudden you become a filmmaker, but you've never had a chance to work with him to bring him into your project. Now you're calling the shots. Always doesn't happen, so it's like, hey, Dad, I got one for you. If you can nail it, go for it. And also for me, I've also tried to work with artists and given them shots to do score. And what you realize is that what artists don't necessarily understand is, like, when you're doing score for a movie, it's not really your music anymore. You have to give yourself up to the project. And Steve Vai, who I hired once to score, and he's like, he did it for me. It was a short, but he said, McHugh, he goes, the thing about this is, like, I make music for myself. I make my own music for my fans. But when I make music for a movie, it's not me. It's like, it's their music. And you have to get out of the way. And that's why a lot of musicians are like, I want to score, but, like, can you really, like, I'm not going to tour for these 3 weeks because I got to jam this thing out. Most people won't take that time off the road financially or whatever to be part of it. So sometimes someone like your dad, who you have a comfort level with, and, you speak first name basis, and exactly, tell him what to do and he can nail it. Right.
Yeah, it was such a joy for me too, to be able to work with him like that, because I've always been such an incredibly devoted fan of him, and been such an admirer of how how true he is to, he stuck with the purity of his music, even when that was just like not necessarily he was never going to get famous or rich playing the blues, being a white guy playing the blues in America.
Gumbo Day and where the Sauce Boss came from, because it's kind of interesting and I'm curious about it.
Well, so my dad, this had to be in the 80s. My dad has always been someone who likes hot sauce. And he started making his own hot sauce. And one year he started, he made up a bunch of hot sauce and put it in mason jars and made these little labels, little stickers that he put on it. He called his hot sauce Liquid Summer Hot Sauce. And one of his friends said to him, "You're the sauce boss. You made a hot sauce." Like, and it became a song. It was like just like this off the cuff remark that it became a song. And he has this song about, like, I'm the sauce boss, baby. And it's awesome. And then it developed in his stage show, where he sort of realized, and people always said to him, like, you should market this sauce. It's amazing. It's really great. He uses Florida daddle peppers. It's a very distinctive flavor, and everyone loves it. If you love hot sauce, you got to check out Liquid Summer. And he put together this whole stage act that was like a part like Baptist tent revival, part snake oil routine, part just classic, bluesy juke joint, like Saturday night in the swamps of Florida, where he would make a pot of gumbo on stage using his hot sauce. And he would do this thing where he would, like, take the top off the hot sauce, and he'd like, "Do you want me to put some hot sauce in?" And the crowd would go crazy, and he'd do like a little drop, and everyone would be like, "No, more." So and then he'd like throw the top away and dump the whole bottle in, and like have this whole pot of gumbo just cooking up through the whole show. He'd do a 90-minute set.
Give it out to the audience, right? And
then he'd serve the audience. And then it evolved into this thing where he started, he would go to, like, on his day off, he'd be touring up and down the Eastern Seaboard, all across America, all over the place. And on his day off, he would stop at a local homeless shelter and serve up a pot of gumbo and give a show for the people in the homeless shelter. And let me tell you, like, kids at homeless shelters would go crazy for it because, you know, they were just dying for some distraction, some entertainment. And it was the most amazing thing that I've ever seen is my dad.
Had we done a pre-talk, I would have asked you to bring on the Sauce Boss to play us out. You know what I mean?
Oh my God, yes. Well,
but I don't want to get hung up on him, but I will say that, because he is fantastic, that it's interesting when you look at his music and you look at Jimmy Carter in this movie and the Southern roots element of it, he really fits in perfectly. You know what I mean? And so it's just kind of cool that you were able to lay that up. So I want to go back to, we have a couple more minutes. I want to go back to a couple questions. So talk about being with Jimmy Carter, and, you know, he's such a calming presence, and he was in the White House, and it's such the exact opposite of what we're dealing with today, where he was a man of integrity, and, you know, he just felt calming and real. And, you know, there was a great line in the movie about, what was the line about Jimmy Carter ever lies to you, don't vote for him, or something like that?
Yeah.
It was? It's a great, right? That's what should be. If you ever catch Jimmy Carter alive, don't vote for him. You know, exact opposite of this Teflon situation we have to deal with today, where every other word is a lie and a fake. So talk about being with him and what that was like for you and getting his trust and interviewing him.
Well, I actually was not the person asking the questions, because we were very lucky to have Bill Flanagan on the project, who's a writer, and he did a lot of the interviews, most of the interviews he did. And that was a great relief to me as you know, that I was wearing a lot of hats on this film. But, you know, I will say that the interesting thing about Jimmy Carter is when always had this impression of him, you know, he's got that 1,000,000-watt smile. He's got that Southern charm. He's got that, you know, he wears a cardigan sweater, and he has got this sort of grandfatherly kind of Mr. Rogers kind of vibe. And, you know, so you sort of expect him to be a little bit like warm and fuzzy, like your grandpa. And when we went in to do the first shoot with him at the Carter Center, we were told, like, you know, he's very punctual. He's a Navy man. He will show up on time, if not early, and you better be ready for him, because he does not suffer fools. He will get annoyed if you're like, you know, if you're, I'm so sorry. I just got distracted, but
no, because the Sauce Boss just showed up.
Sauce Boss just showed up to play us out for a tune.
How did he miss the whole conversation about him? Did we just like conjure him up out of nowhere?
Did. Well, yeah. Sauce Boss,
you're gonna close us out. So you got a couple minutes to listen. Yeah. All right, you're gonna close us out, because I just did a whole deep dive on you, unfortunately, but you'll be able to see it tape. But all right, so finish the thought, Mary, and then we'll ask a couple more and then close out.
Well, I just will say that as much as Jimmy Carter was like sort of a very you know, he was a busy man, he was very like, you know, to the point, ready to get down to business. As soon as he started talking about music, it was like he just lit up. And you can see it in the clips that we use in the film. Like, his face just lights up when he talks about music, and his joy and his pure love of music is the most amazing thing to be a part of and to witness. And it was such a privilege to have that time with him and that opportunity to be with him. And really, I just got to say that with Jimmy Carter, like, what you see is what you get. He truly is the embodiment of the truth, you know, which is a refreshing thing in anyone. But for a politician, I mean, you know, so rare.
Yeah, and last question for you before we go back to Chris and then close with the Sauce Boss is Bob Dylan does not do many interviews at all. What was the process about getting Bob Dylan, and what was that interview like, as far as, whether you did it or not? I'm just curious about what you know about it.
Well, it was never a sure thing that we were going to get him. We knew that Dylan had a great deal of respect for Carter. Carter calls him one of his best friends in the world. And Bill Flanagan was the person that made that happen. And he told us, like, I think he's going to do it. I think he's going to do it. But Dylan was on tour at the time. And so we were basically told, like, maybe sometime in December. This was in December of 2018. And we looked at his tour schedule, and he was everywhere from Texas to Florida to Connecticut and all points in between. So we didn't know where or when or how it was going to happen. And we just kind of had to be ready. And quite frankly, I wasn't even sure that he would truly show up. There was a minute where he was sort of like trying to back out of it. And I think Bill had to reel him back in, and Bill was convincing. He wrote, some convincing letters, and he kept him, engaged and interested. And he showed up, and he was so giving of his time, and really, like, I was impressed by how he had prepared some things to say, which I thought was so cool, because it was almost like he had written a poem about Jimmy Carter, like that thing that we use in the end where he says, he's a philosopher, he's a dirt farmer, he's a scientist. If you told me he was a race car driver, I wouldn't even be surprised. Like, that was something that he had really thought about. And it was almost like he had written a song for about Jimmy Carter. And I just thought that was the coolest thing pretty much ever in my life. It
was great to see it. And Willie, obviously, you really feel the relationship between those two as kindred spirits, in a way, because Willie is probably one of the coolest humans on the planet, right? He's the fact that he's still on the road doing it, and only COVID shut him down to be able to be on the road and continuing to play. Talk about that relationship and what you learned from this film.
Well, Willie was amazing. I mean, he and Carter just have an incredible, simpatico, and I thought it was so great that, Carter tells the story about Willie smoking pot like it's no big deal. It's so off the cuff, and Willie is so, I remember, like, trying to ask him, like, so you guys have, spent some time together. Like, they used to run together back in the 70s and 80s.
I remember seeing that, actually.
They would run in those, like, 80s short shorts. And I asked him, like, what did you guys talk about when you were running? And he was like, we didn't really have to talk. And I said, that is a symbol of a true friend. When you can be with another human being and not talk, like, that means there's no awkwardness. Right. You don't have to fill the space with chatter. Sure. You're brothers, you're simpatico. And that was an amazing thing, the respect that they both have for each other. And, honestly, when Carter told us about listening to Willie's gospel music as a way to sort of get through the Iranian hostage crisis, that to me was a real, watershed moment, because it was like, like this is a sign of how much music really means to him, that when he's going through the most difficult thing he's ever faced in his life, and this is a man who's faced some pretty big challenges, he turns to music, and Willie Nelson's music of all music.
Yeah, it's kind of sad that, in a way, that's what the presidency is remembered for, because that was such a black eye, and it wasn't able to get done while he was on the watch. But that's the way life is, you know.
Yeah.
Just because this is the Guild of Music Supervisors first annual film fest, you come from the music clearance world, and as we, you know, try to educate and teach people what music supervision is, because everybody thinks, oh, it's cool, you get to pick cool music and that's it. It is so much not that. You know, there is that level to it. Some days you get a track here or there, but mostly it's about executing, working with a great director like Mary, and figuring out what music's going to be in and figuring out how to get it done for the budget you have to get it done for. So talk about what your recommendations would be for people to learn, students coming up. And I teach at American University Business of Visual Media class, and a big part of it is learning to clear music and what it takes. So can you give some advice out there on that process? Because you've been doing it for a long time now.
Oh boy, where to start? I mean, I guess the big ones are, you know, just being prepared, bringing in your music supervisor very early. You got to budget time and money. Those are the two big things you got to always keep in mind. You got to figure out what your budget's going to be, what you can realistically afford, work with somebody who's done this a while and sort of knows the market and knows the artists and kind of knows how different projects have different parameters. And, you know, it really is about getting in there early and coming up with something kind of realistic. You know, you know, I've worked on films where, you know, they have in mind, you know, these big songs for, you know, background use in a diner when there's a conversation going on. And it's like, no one's going to,
right.
Yeah. And it's like, we have to have Fleetwood Mac. And it's like, you don't need to have Fleetwood Mac. It'll be distracting. Like, you know, this is going to be buried in the mix. You don't want to compete with the dialogue going on. So, and there's a lot of great independent sources where you can find great music that would work really well in that diner scene for, you know, a fraction of the cost. And, you know, so it's just, you know, bringing someone in very early to have these conversations and to kind of figure out a strategy.
Good. Well, you guys, you did a great job on the film. Mary really loved it, and we're happy on the Guild side to promote it. Try to get you maybe another Grammy next year. We'll help spread the word about it. But we're at about 45 minutes now, so we got to close. But luckily, we got a closer to come on board with us. So can you introduce the composer of the film? And I don't know what he's going to play. First of all, Sauce Boss, where are you tonight? Where are you located?
I'm located near Tallahassee.
And that's where you grew up?
Pardon me?
Is that where you grew up?
No, I grew up in Orlando.
Okay. And Tallahassee is where you've been living for a while?
A long time. I came up here to go to college and stayed. And that was a long, long time ago.
Right. I was telling your daughter, I looked you up and I saw, you know, gumbo, because I went to school in New Orleans. So for me, gumbo is literally my favorite meal when it's the right gumbo. I'm kind of a gumbo snob. So
as you should be.
You gotta
they're out there making gumbo is a fantastic thing, and that you were able to put it together in your act and the hot sauce. It sounds like I can't wait to go to a show when there are such a thing again. But luckily, we'll get a chance to hear some of your music tonight, and tell us a little about that guitar you got there. What is that?
This is a 1933 National Steel guitar. It's the one I found in my front yard one morning. And
how do you think that happened?
Well, a friend of mine was leaving town and he was trying to lighten his load. And so he said, I think Bill could probably use this. And he waited for 2 years to ever let me know that it was him. And during that time, I figured, well, if I can't play this thing when he shows up, I don't deserve to have it. So that's kind of the way I learned to do this. got the 12 gauge blues. Well, look it up. Little swamp.
Sauce Boss, what was your thought about scoring your first movie? How did it feel?
Oh man, it was great. It was kind of like just being with family and friends. Well, it was being with family and friends. And
Fantastic.
everybody, and I was incidentally, many thanks to all involved, because it was just a really magic kind of a vibe there. And everyone gave me such just positive energy, and it's been I've never been in a situation with all things clicking on all levels as much as this. And I'm really, really proud of everyone, and particularly you, Mary. I mean,
yeah, it's a blessing to be able to do something like that. And I just feel it between you two. So I'm just glad I had this tiny little moment together with you all. So I want to thank you, Mary, for making a great film, and for you and Chris for spending time with us. Obviously, we didn't get a huge turnout in our first annual event, but next year, maybe you have another film and we'll have a bigger turnout.
I hope you'll have us back.
So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Sauce Boss. It was like I conjured you up. Bang. So thanks for coming out. And Chris, and on behalf of Mondo and the Guild of Music Supervisors, go watch this movie, man. Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President. It's a great one. Thank you guys all, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.